Well, greetings, friends. Today I will continue with my book, The Legendary Life of Ernest Jeshurum Giro, chapters 3 and 4, and I hope that you will enjoy listening to this audiobook as the one that I did yesterday. And so, here it is, The Legendary Life of Ernest Jeshurum Giro. The New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries present the Messenger of the Lord with Apostle Jeshurum, preaching the gospel of the good news of the kingdom of God and informing you about world events in the light of Bible prophecy and preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Apostle Jeshurum. Chapter 3, The Other Legendary Women in My Life. Justa Caridad Carrie Dominguez. After my divorce with Marie, I was so devastated and so sad with my life and so disappointed with the church and God that I decided to just go back into the world and started to backslide, and I began to start doing a lot of music contests and began my singer-songwriting career in the things of the world. It was in 1992 that I wrote my first song in blanco y negro, in black and white, a very nice pop ballad which I did in the style of popular Latin singer Jose Jose. The lyrics to that song were so moving and so overwhelming because it spoke about when you lose the love of your life and that made you had for so long. It's like suddenly life turns from living color to a dull black and white hue. That's exactly how I felt after losing my wife for 7 years. The moment I brought that song over to a friend of mine called Johnny Guillen, who was an incredible musician and a pianist from Nicaragua, and he heard it, he said to me, "This has a great potential to become a hit. So let's sit down and immediately work on making the arrangement to it." And then we both sat down on the keyboard, and while I suggested the instruments that were already on my mind for the song, he kept adding them in a real time to the arrangement. By the time we were through, we had just a beautiful song. I was so happy and very overwhelmed by the fact I had just created a great song. In fact, the song was pitched to many publishers, record labels, etc., and it landed me my first songwriter's contract with Americatone International Publishers in Las Vegas, Nevada. And soon after that, there was a woman who was writing a new soap opera for TV in Miami called Mujer Sin Destino, Woman Without a Destiny. She had decided to create a songwriting contest for songwriters to submit their own renditions of the theme song for the novella she was working on. I was invited to meet her, and so I took my song in blanco y negro with me in a cassette for her to listen to. She truly enjoyed it and was very interested by it, but she mentioned to me that it was a shame that the lyrics had nothing to do with the project she had, so she gave me a synopsis of what the soap opera would be about, so I could grasp the whole idea, and gave me a few days to meet the deadline of the contest and produce a new song as a theme song. So I really worked hard and came up with a song which I called Mujer Errante, Wandering Woman, and as soon as I took it to her and she played it, she said to me, "Oh my God, that's a song I have been waiting for. That's it! That's definitely the theme song." Immediately she had me sign a songwriter's contract and told me I would become rich because this soap opera was going to be aired all over the world. And she already had the rights shared with a number of the well-known TV stations in Latin America. The sad part is that for some unknown reason, the whole project was left alone and all production on it was abruptly stopped, and my contract never really got off the ground. I guess God was somehow showing me the price you pay when you leave the things of God and go back into the world. Anyhow, I wrote another song soon afterwards which I called Mi Gata, My Cat. It was a romantic salsa which spoke about a woman who was very feline-like, very sensual, sexy and provocative as a cat to me. It was another successful hit, and Johnny had a Cuban female singer friend listen to it, and she immediately wanted to include me in the upcoming show she was presenting at a very popular nightclub in Miami. The show would be called Rosie y las Estrellas de Miami, Rosie and the Stars of Miami, and it was at this event that I met my next girl and mate, Carrie. She was a Cuban vivacious blonde with a great body who would be the dancing girl to the special choreography to my song. That was really cool because they had her come down from the ceiling in a cage, dressed like a cat, and she even had the long nails and all. That performance was truly the highlight of the show, and needless to say, the chemistry we both had and the incredible attraction was nothing short of a love at first sight. And so Carrie and I began dating shortly after that. In a very short time, we found ourselves on one of those one-day cruises to the Bahamas and staying overnight there, and the sex was simply just out of this world. And we really became one flesh afterwards. I still remember how once back on the ship on the way to Miami, there was a point we were just staring at each other, and suddenly we both said, "I love you," to each other. That very instant, it was something magical and simply wonderful. We both were so in love, so it seemed, but as time went by, I soon realized that all we had was just lust. Many months later, our relationship was a total disaster. Amazing and fantastic sex, no doubt about it. There was one particular time I counted 11 orgasms from Carrie in just one night alone. But her jealousy and her dark side kept popping up, to the point that one day I was about to come out of the shower and I opened the bathroom door. Carrie was wielding a very big and sharp knife in her hand, with a very diabolical stare that was just right from the main scene from Psycho. I had the scare of my life. Fortunately for me, the neighbors heard the commotion inside and called the police, and she was restrained. And here's where this following scripture comes to mind. My son, attend unto my wisdom, and bow thine ear to my understanding, that thou mayest regard discretion, and that thy lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil, but her end is bitter as wormwood. Sharp as a two-edged sword, her feet go down to death, her steps take hold on hell, lest thou shouldest ponder the path of life. Her ways are movable, that thou canst not know them. Proverbs 5 verses 1 through 6. Verses 8 through 14. Remove thy way far from her, and come not nigh the door of her house, lest thou give thine honor unto others, and thy years unto the cruel. Lest strangers be filled with thy wealth, and thy labors be in the house of a stranger, and thou mourn at the last, when thy flesh and thy body are consumed, and say, How have I hated instruction, and my heart despised reproof, and have not obeyed the voice of my teachers, Mr. Armstrong, etc., nor incline my ear to them that instructed me. I was almost in all the evil in the midst of the congregation and assembly, which I used to attend before. The Bible further instructs us to drink waters out of thine own cistern, and running waters out of thine own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad, and rivers of waters in the streets. Let them be only thine own, and not strangers with thee. Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as a loving hind and a pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love. And why wilt thou, my son, be ravished with a strange woman, and embrace the bosom of a stranger? Proverbs 5:15 through 20. So then, what was the lesson learned here? Well, it's simply this. I chose the ways of the world, and I had to pay the price for my iniquity. And God was showing me this somehow, because it is written in Proverbs 5:21 to 23, For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he pondereth all his doings. His own iniquity shall take the wicked himself, and he shall behold them with the cords of his sins. He shall die without instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he shall go astray. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. Last not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her painted eyelids. For by means of a whorish woman a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. Can a man take fire in his bosom, and his clothes not be burnt? Can one go upon her coals, and his feet not be burnt? Proverbs 6:23-28. Inés Maria Vasconez, albino trouble. I met Inés on a Metro Day bus on my way to work one day. My car was at the mechanic's shop, so I had to rely on public transportation that day. She was sitting all alone, and I decided to sit next to her. There was something about this albino blonde, blue-eyed girl from Ecuador that really got my attention. So I decided to break the ice with a silly line like, "It's really cold in this bus, is it, right?" She agreed with a nod on her head and a very friendly smile, so before I got off I was able to exchange phone numbers with her. I used to be a limo chauffeur back then for Oceania Island, one of the many properties of German millionaires and real estate mogul Gary Kleikamp. I was in fact her private chauffeur. One of the nicest perks about that job is that she would provide limo services to all her properties, to her tenants as well as her condo owners who were time-sharing in Miami. I would make a lot of fabulous tips and had the privilege to take the limo home after I was done for the day. It was one of those nights that I got off a bit early from my driving duties, and I called Inés and asked her for a date before she left back to Ecuador. I picked her up in the limo and took her to a nice club in Coral Gables, and we ended spending the night at her hotel that night. We had a very nice connection at the time, and I loved the fact that she seemed to be very different from all the Miami girls. Something about her nationality told me she would be a good catch and a possible marriage material for me. We kept calling each other back and forth after that romantic rendezvous we had, and one thing led to another, and in a very short time I proposed to her on the Europa Sea Cruise, a casino ship I used to work at as a cruise director. She said yes, and in about a month's time we were tying the knot publicly on a Metro bus, which was decorated as a mobile chapel courtesy of Metro Day on Valentine's Day of 1996. It made worldwide headlines, and our wedding was aired on every conceivable TV station and show. Turned out to be the very first historic time two people got married on a public bus. We decided to do it because we had met on the bus. We were even invited to one of these talk shows as special guests in New York afterwards, with fully paid airfare, hotel and limo service, besides all the free publicity, which somehow gave me more exposure as an artist. I remember doing something similar with Carrie. I was called for an interview on the air with a local radio station while living with her, and I decided to propose to her while being on the air because I knew she was listening to this particular show. So lo and behold, she said yes. And the show host and producers were fascinated and so impressed with that, they decided to conduct the wedding ceremony on the radio station live. Thank goodness that it was officiated by a notary public and it never got signed by a judge. Otherwise, I would have been in a lot of hot water, as I later found out the hard way. The kind of woman Carrie turned out to be a real nutcase. So anyhow, Inés decided to take me to live with her to Ecuador, and I gladly agreed to that prospect. I was tired of Miami and so many bad memories there that I thought a nice change of scenery and culture would probably do us a lot of good. So off we went to Ecuador, and at the beginning things were running smoothly as we were living in her parents' house. We were pressured by her Catholic family to get married officially by the Catholic Church. Then things went a bit awry after that. I began working there as an English teacher teaching ESL. It gave me a beautiful opportunity to use my skills, which I had trained for a while attending the Church of God in the past as an orator and speaker. I worked for the most prominent and finest educational institutions in Quito. Cardinal Spellman School of Girls as an English geography teacher, Sandia English Institute as a private English tutor for professionals, Universidad Internacional del Ecuador, Ecuador International University, in the capacity of English professor. I also gave a seminar about the 3 different types of love while teaching there to other students and faculty. And lastly, I worked for the prestigious Washington English Institute. I also did a lot of interpreter and translation work as well. But one of the best and most exciting jobs I found there was a traveling salesman for an internet company that wanted me to sell web pages and websites to various hospitality businesses and tour operators, travel agencies, and restaurants in all the many tourist towns and attractions of all the various regions of Ecuador. It was in one of those particular and beautiful towns, Baños de Agua Santa, that I met a lovely restaurant manager called Carol, and I was hooked by her charm and beauty. It was truly love at first sight. I began to take many trips there in order to pursue my adulterous fling with her, and eventually I had to drop it as a hot potato, otherwise I would have probably ended dead or something, because as it turned out, she had someone else. This of course happened because I was still backsliding in the world and wouldn't heed to the biblical admonition in Proverbs 7 verses 1 through 27. My son, keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee. Keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of thine eye. Bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the table of thine heart. Say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman, that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement, and beheld among the simple ones I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding, passing through the street near her corner, and he went away to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark of night. And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn, her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. So she caught him and kissed him, and with an impudent face said unto him, I have peace offerings with me. This day have I paid my vows, therefore came I forth to meet thee, diligently to seek thy face, and I have found thee. I had decked my bed with coverings of tapestry, with carved works, with fine linen of Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with loves, for the good man is not at home, he is gone a long journey. Carol had a guy who was a trucker. He had taken a bag of money with him and will come home at the day appointed. With her much fair speech she caused him to yield. With the fluttering of her lips she forced him. He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks. Till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. Hearken unto me now therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways. Go not astray in her paths, for she has cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. And so shortly after my fling with Carol, my marriage with Ernest deteriorated to the point that it ended in divorce. The good news is that she gave me my only begotten son Andy, and God was restoring me slowly but surely into the work which He had called me to do. But there were still some obstacles on my long way to recovery into the ways of God again. Nuria Maria Kaufman, Spanish Jewish queen. Nuria was a Sephardic Jewish blonde woman from Spain that I met at La Carreta when I stopped there for a cortadito, a small Cuban cafe latte. He was driving a green Dodge Caravan van, and she looked very good for a chubby girl, but for me she was just the right size at 5'2" in height. We had some chit-chat and exchanged phone numbers, and in the twinkling of an eye, I invited her for a cup of wine at my place at the trailer park I was living in at the time. I waited for her in a black kingly attire with a red sash and all. She got a bit scared at first and frankly thought I reminded her of Count Dracula from Transylvania. And that made me chuckle and laugh so loud, so I immediately stared at her with a deep stare and said, "Look into my eyes," like Bela Lugosi would say in the film of Dracula, and she got a kick out of that. I showed her around the place and some of my artwork and my paintings, and she was very impressed. She told me she owned a condo in North Miami Beach, and she had a roommate that was renting one of her bedrooms by the name of Carlos from Venezuela. So I said that was fine as long as we were just dating, but if we got serious then I would move in with her and Carlos had to move out. She wasn't very happy about that, as I later found out. She took me to her place and she had a gray schnauzer called Snoopy. We had a nice sex life from day one. Once Carlos was out of the way, I was her king and master at her place. She had a floral sales business which was very lucrative, and I was working for a call center back then. I would come on and she would have dinner ready and after we ate, I would take a shower and she would take a nice long bubble bath while I waited in the bedroom with my boxer shorts and soft music and candles and aromatic incense lighted up. She would come out in a very skimpy and sexy night lingerie and would have terrific sex. Every night was the same routine. After a while I began to see her real true colors, as they say. She became very distrusting of me and jealous of my co-workers and any female that could be anywhere near me for that matter. She would usually go pick me up at work since my car was totaled. Another problem with Nuria was the fact that she would always go into her own little world and had an incredible obsession with her hair. I mean, she was at the beauty salon every single Saturday getting her hair done, something I didn't mind too much but made her a bit annoying and compulsive. But as we read in Proverbs 9:13, a foolish woman is clamorous, she is simple and knoweth nothing. However, she certainly had a kind of flair and grace to her voluptuous beauty that was, in all honesty, mesmerizing. A gracious woman retaineth honor, and strong men retain riches. Proverbs 11:16. Also notice Proverbs 12:4. A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh a shame is as rottenness in his bone. And it got to a point where no matter what I did to save the relationship, she would just ruin everything for the both of us. I remember one time I bought a scooter and wanted her to ride it with me, and she would never get on it. It's like she kept drifting and drifting apart and away from me. That's when I realized that it was time for me to move on, and as you read in Proverbs 14:1, every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. And so that was the end of my story with Nuria. We lived at her condo for about 3 years, and that was it. That's all, folks. Brenda Ornelas. I met Brenda online through a dating site called Plenty of Fish. You see, at the time I was still a backslider, and I had somewhat misinterpreted that scripture where Jesus said, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men," Matthew 4:19. In my own wicked way, I just changed that a bit, so I read that as fishers of women. You see, the devil had such a hold on me that he twisted and perverted, as he usually does, even the scriptures. Anyway, I was looking for a job outside of Miami, in perhaps another state and city, and Brenda gave me the solution. She said, "I live here in Killeen, Texas, with my 7 foster kids, and I have a nice house and 2 cars, and I work for the U.S. Army at Fort Hood. Why don't you come here and live with me and be a dad to these kids, and you can drive one of my cars, and I'll even find you a job here." Now, with that kind of proposal, it would be very hard for anyone in my situation to refuse, right? I was staying at my mother's place and without a job, so I figured, what do I have to lose? What a great offer I had. A beautiful blonde with blue eyes, a house to live in, a car to drive with kids, all in one sweet package deal. Let me put it this way, I didn't think it twice to say yes. Call me an opportunist, whatever, but at the time I saw that as a godsend and a real blessing. I remember getting to the Dallas airport and seeing Brenda standing by a column at the baggage checkout area with a rose in her hand, just waiting for me to check my luggage, and she looked so lovely and beautiful. She had a nice flowery dress on and some sexy high heels too. I can't believe she had driven all the way from Killeen to pick me up. So once we got to her place, all the kids came out to greet me and welcome me, and she said to me, "Welcome to your new home, Ernie," and gave me a nice kiss. At first everything was wonderful and like living in a dream, but after about a couple of months with her, it all turned into a real nightmare. She was bipolar and a smoker and had an incredible temper. The kids were nice to me, they would cook for me and the works, but the house had a roach infestation and there were cockroaches all over, even in my pancakes sometimes. It was truly disgusting, to say the least. But being the humble and meek person that I am and always been, I decided to overlook some things and pay no attention to them. Brenda took me to the workforce and I got a job working for Sally Mae at their call center there. And everything was cool for a while. We would go to church on Sundays and I would drive her brand new Suburban. I even saw an actual deer crossing the road on those backwoods roads and would take to the countryside. All my life I had seen that familiar deer crossing sign on the road, but I had never seen a deer actually doing that till I moved to Texas. I remember one night Brenda and I went dancing to a local salsa club, and she took off her shoes and we hit the dance floor and had such a ball. I really had the time of my life back then, as a popular tune says, but it all ended one day that she woke up on the wrong side of the bed and took the kids to the mall. It was a Saturday. I was on my day off and had my regular allergies, so I was taking Benadryl and sleeping a lot. So she walked in the bedroom and said this to me in a high tone of voice. "Get up and mow the lawn or do something. It's Saturday and I don't like to see a man in bed all day." So I said to her, "If you think you're going to treat me like a drill sergeant would do, and order me around as if you were my commanding officer, I got news for you. I don't like when people order me around and tell me what to do. That's why I never joined the armed forces, okay?" And I immediately took off, and that was the end of that. You see, I had read in the Bible that it's better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and an angry woman. And I know, looking back in retrospect, that perhaps if I had simply remained quiet and calmly explained to her that I was sick that day and would eventually get up to help around the house, I would probably have stayed there way much longer than 2 months instead of finding myself suddenly homeless in a strange town and with no one to help me. I forgot to read this scripture, "Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles." And now I was in trouble. I had no place to go, so it seemed. So I walked over to the local Wendy's and sat down to drink a cup of coffee and think out a new plan. And this derelict woman there noticed I looked kind of worried and asked me bluntly what was wrong. So when I told her I had no place to live, she said to me, "Well, just follow me. I'm going to take you to this black people church where they can help you and give you shelter. They do that for everybody regardless of race and color." And lo and behold, I got there and did get shelter and food, and in no time God spoke to me and told me, "I will finish the work that I started in you." In other words, God was simply saying it was time to come back to Him, and so I did. I began to repent of all my sins and to change my ways and stop resisting my calling into the ministry like Jonas had done, and I just simply surrendered all to Him. My life was but a mere piece of junk, not even worthy to be thrown into the junk pile. I said to Him, and God renewed me, and because of my example and faithful commitment to God's word there, the pastor of the church, Pastor Cole, ordained me as a deacon in the church. It was truly hilarious, though. Imagine I was the only white Cuban in the ministry there, and jumping up and down with those black folks on Sunday services, just like that old movie, The Jerk, with Steve Martin. God had blessed me so much while being there that in a very short time I even was able to rent a room in the town's main hotel, which had a pool and all for just $450 a month, with all bills included. Needless to say, I got an incredible suntan that summer. The lessons I learned from the book of Proverbs during this time were priceless. There is no wisdom or understanding or counsel against the Lord. The horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord. Proverbs 21:30-31. Another lesson I learned was that by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Proverbs 22:4. And the toughest lesson I had to learn in my experience with Brenda was this: the mouth of strange women is a deep pit. He that is abhorred of the Lord shall fall therein. Proverbs 22:14. So God simply wanted me to understand and realize that I needed to heed His words as a wise and loving God He is. Bow down thine ear and hear the words of the wise, and apply thine heart or mind unto my knowledge. For it is a pleasant thing if thou keep them within thee. They shall withal be fitted in thy lips, that thy trust may be in the Lord. I have made known to thee this day, even to thee. Have not I written to thee excellent things in counsels and knowledge, that I might make thee know the certainty of the words of the truth, that thou mightest answer the words of truth to them that I send unto thee. Proverbs 22:17-21. I have still a deep desire to become rich and wealthy, and then I read this. Labor not to be rich. Cease from thine own wisdom. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. And looking back in retrospect now, I was constantly trying to build all that people in the world are always seeking. Material stuff. Accumulating wealth, money, and things. I wanted the good life, just like everyone else, and ended up always trying to keep up with the Joneses. I had lost the house I had bought with all my earnings and savings to Marie during my divorce with her. All the many cars I had possessed in my entire life, all the best jobs you could think of I had. And without all these great-looking and amazing women, so I thought. And then God decided to retrain me and take control over my life again, and taught me to apply thine heart unto instruction and thine ears to the words of knowledge. Proverbs 23:12. He said to me, Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. Be not amongst winebibbers, amongst riotous eaters of flesh, for the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. Proverbs 23:19-21. Now notice verses 26-28. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. For a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. She also lieth in wait as for a prey, and increaseth the transgressors among men. Then he gives an amazing warning to those who love to drink and get drunk. Notice this in Proverbs 23:29-35. Who hath woe, problems or troubles? Who hath sorrow and pain? Who hath contentions? Who hath bubbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine or strong drink. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth its colour in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thy heart, O mind, shall utter perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. And so I began to seek my love once again after my experience there with Brenda. Mary ruled in my bed. Soon after my breakup with Brenda, and while living at the town motel for about a month, I met this beautiful blonde girl with green eyes on the bus while commuting to work every day. Her name was Mary Rule, and she was bent on ruling not only my bed but my whole life from that point onward. She suggested I leave Sally Mae and go work for the call center. She was working for GC Services. There was a sort of chemistry building up between me and her, and she also was a Christian, and we had a real connection right off the bat. One day she invited me over her place to do a Bible study with me over a cup of wine. She wanted to understand my real sense of theology and what were my convictions in the Lord. And I presented myself to her as an open book, just like I had done all of my life. I had nothing to hide and no skeletons in my closet, thank God. She lived in a beautiful yellow cottage on Stringer Street in Killeen. She was wearing a pair of white pants and a nice white blouse, and she was barefoot when I arrived at her door that Sunday. I could sense that her attraction was so obvious and so great that in the blinking of an eye we would probably end up falling in love. And that is exactly what happened. It all started with a nice foot massage that I gave her after discussing things about God. And suddenly we were kissing passionately and gave in to our lust and carnal desires, and in the heat of passion and desire, we found ourselves entwined and enraptured in our lovemaking, and immediately became one flesh. Yes, we had accidentally and intuitively entered into an unofficial marriage relationship that day by God's own standards. And at first it looked like a match made in heaven. I mean, we were as a couple who had known each other ages before. Since we worked in the same place and same work environment, we would go to work together and meet on our breaks and lunch. I remember she would dress so well and so nice that she always looked hot and sexy no matter what she wore that day. I hate to admit that even with all the lovemaking we had at night, I would have to run to the men's room at any given point during the day just to masturbate by looking at her beautiful legs alone at work. It was a real lustful and incredible and deep desire I had for this luscious and ravishing blonde back then. It was also at Mary's house that I was bitten by the black widow spider and survived. But then I began to notice something truly bad about her. She, like Brenda, also had a bipolar disorder, and she was very moody at times and found herself bickering at me and creating an argument with me for petty stuff. With a jealous rage also, she would claim other women at work were eyeing me, and that bothered her a lot, so she claimed. There's this proverb that reads, "It is better to dwell in a corner of a housetop than with a brawling woman and with a white house." Proverbs 25:24. And so one day I simply decided that I didn't want to end up having a problem or some sort of trouble with a woman like that after my experience with Brenda. That I called in sick one day and had asked a friend of mine from Sally Mae to come pick me up and take me to the Greyhound station so I could take a bus back to Miami. I just didn't have the heart to tell her I was leaving, and I felt so bad and so sad that I made that decision. To my amazement and surprise, turns out she had smelled out somehow I would do that. I guess it's that womanly sixth sense they have, and she figured out somehow I was on a Greyhound bus, so she got in her car to meet me at the next terminal and bus station, at the stop which was Austin. As I was at the Austin station doing a layover, I heard the loudspeaker of the intercom there saying, "Passenger Ernest Giro, please come to the counter. Phone call for you." And to my surprise, as I approached the counter and grabbed the phone, she was on the other line telling me, "Please don't go. I love you. I'm here outside in the parking lot." And I didn't even realize that they had put this thing on speakerphone, and it all came out through the intercom system. And everyone at the station heard her words, and I suddenly heard a loud round of applause. So I immediately ran outside and hugged her and kissed her by her car and went back to grab my luggage from the bus, and so I returned with her back to Killeen. That incredible and wonderful scene and event we had lived in Austin was nothing short of a very romantic Hollywood movie for sure. But shortly after that we had many woes and problems that did arise, which unfortunately caused a huge rupture in the relationship, and we each had to part our own separate ways. Fiordalisa Mendez, hit by Lisa. I met Fiordalisa Lisa back in 2006 on a summer vacation to New Jersey to visit my sister and my uncle and aunt living there. She was from Metashan, and she was a tough Puerto Rican girl with a very dominant attitude from Newark, where she used to live before. I later found out she also had lived in Elizabeth and East Orange. I myself came from North Bergen and Union City, where I grew up. She had her own place and had a son in the army, but she was trouble. Her mom told me she would act like a floozy and just would hang out around local bars and nightclubs all the time. Besides this, I also learned the hard way that she had quite a temper. It was one day that I wanted to leave her house, and she just wouldn't let me and actually punched me in the stomach so hard she knocked my air out for a moment there. Well, she was about 5'1", and she weighed about 165, so let's say she was a bit on the chubby side and somewhat plump, but she had a nice pair of boobs and a fine butt. So I was hooked up, but after the short-lived romance with her, I had to almost run for my life. As one old friend and brother in Christ from the Worldwide Church of God would say, she was a hot wire. His name was Ray. I'll never forget that was his favorite remark when describing most of the single women in the church. He was a single guy who had many issues. At the time Marie and I met him, the first downtime and disappointing event that I experienced with Lisa was that she took off on her birthday to Orlando for a weekend fling over there, and we were dating at the time. But what really put the icing on the cake was one time that we had an argument over some silly thing, and she became extremely violent with me, so much so that I actually feared for my life. She was always in a very bad mood and constantly nagging me and being contentious with me. Notice Proverbs 25:24. It is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a white house. And as Proverbs 27:15-16 reads, A continual dropping in a very rainy day, and a contentious woman are alike. Whosoever hideth her hideth the wind, and the ointment of his right hand, which bewrayeth itself. Another problem she had was that she was very self-righteous, and when confronted with her sins and her faults, she would simply deny everything. She wasn't the type of woman who would take responsibility for her actions, just as is written in Proverbs 30 verses 12 through 13, which says, "There is a generation that are pure in their own eyes, and yet is not washed from their filthiness. There is a generation, oh how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. Such is the way of an adulterous woman. She eateth and wipeth her mouth, and saith, I have done no wickedness." Proverbs 30 verse 20. And this is why good old King Lemuel gives us guys the following words of wisdom found in Proverbs 31:3. "Give not thy strength unto women like Samson did, nor thy way to that which destroyeth kings." And so that relationship with Lisa had to end. And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and her hands as bands. Whoso pleaseth God shall escape from her, and escape I did. I took off in my convertible and got on the New Jersey Turnpike at about 70 miles per hour, trying to get away from her as fast as possible. But the sinner shall be taken by her. Ecclesiastes 7:26. Julie Major, a major headache and heartache in my life. I met Julie on a singles dating site called POF, Plenty of Fish. We both were 47 at the time. We had our first face-to-face encounter on July 7th of 2007 at a local Walgreens store. At the parking lot, we both ran up to each other and hugged and kissed like you would see in those Hollywood films about love. She was a very beautiful, lovely, and vivacious blonde with just perfect and really lovely green eyes, and she was Cuban-American, just like me. And like she was also a Christian, we seemed to have a lot in common at first. That's until she truly showed me her true colors, and the deception began. As I later on discovered, she was what they call a nigger lover, another airhead blonde attracted by black men because of their huge manhood and prowess. And she was sort of living a double life as an evangelical Christian woman who pressured me for marriage and would frequent many Sunday churches, and at the same time she was videotaping herself with her black lovers, having sex with them, and referring to them as good rides, and even some WhatsApp messages she had sent me when confronted by me. In other words, she was playing the whore behind my back for 7 long years, till I came across one of those videos online. I found it really odd and unusual that she would come over from time to time to my place and would just give me a foot job. And I would never see her like on national holidays like 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Xmas, and New Year's, for example. She would be also completely absent from my life on most weekends as well, and she kept giving me the excuse that she had to take care of her young kids, blah blah blah. I found out that she had a total of 7 kids. 4 of them were adults already, all from different men from all over the states. I also learned that she was very secretive about her home and whereabouts, and she would always keep me in the dark about what was she up to most of the time. I felt so hurt and betrayed by her. My current nightmare, Gigi. In the book of Proverbs chapter 31 verses 10 through 28 we read, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband does safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax to keep her house warm, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it with the fruit of her hands. She planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth for her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple, the color of royalty. Her husband is known in the gates. He is a leader in the community. When he sitteth among the elders of the congregation of the land, she maketh fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant, a true businesswoman. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is a law of kindness. She looketh well to the way of her household, always taking care of her family, and eateth not the bread of idleness, always working, can't stay still. Her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Well, Gigi, I thought I had found in her that elusive virtuous woman, but boy was I wrong. I met her way back in 97 when I used to live in Quito, Ecuador, and was going through my legal separation from Ernest. She was so pretty and so uniquely lovely and beautiful, and still is. But at the time she had begun dating my dad, who was 20 years her senior. 18 years passed by, and my dad also passed at age 79. I want you to make note of these numbers, for they will be pretty much influential in the numerology of Gigi and I. You see, I was able to make a mathematical equation using both our birthdays and came up with the number 7 and 9. She being number 9 and I the 7th. It turns out that just by numerology standards alone, as we were supposed to be a perfect match. So I remember before my dad died, he had come to visit while I was living in Killeen and told me that if anything should happen to him, to please take care of his widow Gigi. So as soon as I heard about his death, I tried as much as I could to convey that message to her, and I guess she took it a bit the wrong way. So she immediately discarded the idea of living with me or becoming my maid and possibly marrying me after my dad died, which was understandable and reasonable, so I thought. But then something truly interesting happened. God began to talk to the two of us individually while we were living in different lands, she in Ecuador and I in the States. The remarkable thing is that about a year and some months that my dad had passed away, she contacted me and told me to go to Ecuador and live with her, and that my dad had left me some clothing and things, and she needed the company and was tired of being a lonely widow. She also told me that she was praying to God to find her a man who was godly and as nice as my dad was to her, and especially who would have the same features, resemblance, and characteristics as him. And I said to her, well, sweet, look no further. Here I am. I even went as far as to explain to her how Jesus, when Philip asked him, Lord, would you show us the Father? He immediately answered, have I been with you for so long, Philip, and you are still asking me to show you the Father? If you have seen me, you have seen the Father, for I and the Father are one. Please see John 14:9. And so I told Gigi I took my life. I look just like my father, and the only difference is that I am an ordained minister, and he was not. He was pretty much in the world, but I thank God that he partook of the Word of God with me during one of my radio shows, where he was my guest of honor, and I told him the message of the gospel of Christ, and I believe that he received the Lord Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior before he died. So I didn't hesitate much about answering Gigi's proposal, and I gave it a resounding yes. In no time after that, I was taking a flight to Quito, Ecuador from Houston. When we met at the airport, it was simply just like love at first sight. We immediately clicked and kissed passionately. It was almost as if we had been together for ages. Gigi seemed to be truly the girl of my dreams. She was the kind of woman I had been praying to God for the longest time, for about 4 years to be exact, and in order to honor my dad's wishes before he passed and his loving memory, I decided to be her new husband and mate. Needless to say, we faced a whole bunch of rejection and animosity from family members who thought of the mere idea as nothing but blasphemy and heresy, to say the least. But Gigi and I were fully aware of who was guiding and directing our steps, Almighty God himself. So building upon that confidence and commitment to please him and obey him, we continued into our love with a lot of faith and hope. We became inseparable ever since, but after a while, I did realize Gigi really turned out not to be that proverbial virtuous woman I really thought that I could trust, and I have nothing really good to say about her as it is right now. She was supposed to do me only good and no evil all the days of her life, Proverbs 31:12. She is truly an odious, fastidious, obnoxious, selfish, and money-hungry bitch. And now that I think about it, what I thought to be a blessing for me in my life really turned out to be a real curse. We are so incompatible, it's not even funny anymore. We have spent 4 years of our marriage bickering, fighting, arguing, and in total misery, unhappiness, and life where has truly been a living hell. No wonder my dad would tell me every time he would visit me, I curse the day that you presented me, that woman, Gigi, to me. And now I know why he said that. Anyhow, we are in the process of getting a divorce, and so I will soon be single again at 63. And I'm sure God has somebody way much better than her out there waiting for me, because I really deserve better. Chapter 4. The coolest jobs I ever had. The first cool job I ever had in my life was an activities coordinator at Club Fortuna Beach in all-inclusive resort in Freeport, Grand Bahama. It was a contract position for 6 months to a year, and I was hired for this position by an Italian company back in 1992 called Venta Club, which owned various resorts like this all over the world. The coolest thing about it was that my work involved entertaining the guests at all times, preparing beach activities and games for them whether on the beach or by the pool. Also coordinating boat tour excursions to a local sandbar with one of the locals as my deckhand. An assistant would drop the anchor and dive for a sea star to show them, and then the other dude will dive for a big conch which we would prepare and eat at the sandbar. The rest of the day would include creating and presenting shows after dinner at the resort stage and theater, with different comedy sketches which Italians call casino, to talent shows, singing, dancing, the works. Then the stage turned into a club dance floor with all sorts of color lighting and so forth, and a DJ would play music for a while. Then we all would go to the game rooms and play pool or billiards with the guests, bingo, etc. Then everyone went to bed and the whole routine would start again the next day. I really loved the all-you-can-eat buffet meals 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch and dinner, and as part of the compensation the staff also had free drinks at the bar, and believe it or not, we all lived not on the premises but next to the resort in a very cozy and nice guest house with our own rooms and maid service as well. My pay was $300 a week, which was a great salary during that time and no taxes. My second coolest job was working as a cruise director for a casino cruise operation that would go out of Miami Beach into open ocean on various day or night cruises under the name Europa Sea Cruise. And what I loved about it is that after the captain and the officers on board the ship, I was next in charge and was responsible for the supervision and hiring of all entertainment personnel, as well as the safety of the passengers on board. I had to assist them with boarding and greet them, also walk about the casino part of it, and hand out free coins to play at random to whomever I chose to give this to. I also had to make sure that if a damsel in distress was feeling cold or a bit seasick, I would offer her a blanket and a Dramamine pill. I obviously conquered many a lady with this position, and by of course showing off with my singing and live presentations on board. I also enjoy the free meals and drinks at the bar and wearing a nice tux most of the time. To me it was a very prestigious position indeed, and I had lots of fun and met a myriad of lovely ladies while at it. I remember one in particular who became my girlfriend later. As she got off the boat, she handed me her crumpled phone number and a small piece of paper as she held my hand and thanked me with a kiss on my cheek for being so courteous and helpful with her on the trip. The third coolest job I had was as a limo chauffeur for American VIP limousines, and consequently for other various limo companies as well. I had lots of fun doing this kind of work, and needless to say, made a lot of money, especially in tips and gratuities. Mostly doing airport pickups and drop-offs, but also weddings, special events, and romantic dinners, etc. Sometimes there would be a single person hiring our services, like in the case of a very cute girl who was an alcoholic, and she was dressed very sexy and lovely, yet smelled like liquor from miles away. She couldn't stand on her own 2 feet when I went to pick her up at a residence, so she asked me to hold her by the arm just so she could walk to the limo. This was an incredible experience indeed, and it landed me in her bedroom that very night. We hit it off real well after I took her to the local AA charter and to South Beach for a night ride around town. She had problems with adjusting the stereo system, so she called me to the back as I was driving her home and asked me to help her put on music. So I went back to assist her. She grabbed me and felt how hard I was and smacked me with a kiss, and one thing led to another, and needless to say, we had a great evening together. Besides this job, I was also hired by the Oceania Island developers in North Miami Beach as the official private chauffeur for Miss Gary Kleikamp, a real estate millionaire and mogul. The coolest thing about that was not just the prestige and the fact she was a very beautiful woman, but she would allow me to take the limo home after I was done with her, and I remember how I took my fiancée, the girl who would become my second wife, at one time to a club on the limo, and that was pretty cool. She was really impressed, to say the least. One of my most memorable, among the coolest jobs I had while living in Ecuador with my second wife Ines Maria was webpage salesperson. I was a traveling salesman who got paid a salary plus commission and other nice benefits like paid travel all over Ecuador with all hotel and meal expenses paid, going to most tourist locations in order to promote and sell web pages to local businesses around the tourism industry. And this was, of course, when the internet was still in its infancy. So how cool was that? One of my favorite spots was a small quaint town called Baños de Agua Santa, and since my marriage was on the rocks, as they say, and on the verge of a divorce, I met this beautiful girl there who was managing a restaurant, and we had a nice and torrid affair, I must confess, but it was like heaven for me. Needless to say, I was a top salesman for the company, and they sent me all over, so I had so much fun everywhere I went there. In fact, I did some of the most amazing, exciting, and interesting jobs in Ecuador in 5 years I lived there, than all of my life living in the U.S. I worked for the Universidad Internacional del Ecuador, the International University of Ecuador, as an English professor, and even gave a lecture on the topic of love once. I was also a translator-interpreter for various business organizations that needed simultaneous translations in various events and meetings between top company officials and CEOs. I was also a private English tutor for executives and professionals in Quito, and even taught English geography for a Catholic high school there. Then after my Ecuadorian experience, I came back to the US and had some very interesting jobs and positions afterwards that were very cool and exciting as well. For example, I became a dock attendant for a North Miami Beach marina and its bait shop, so I was in charge of assisting boaters in docking and tying up their lines so they could gas up their boats and get supplies at the shop there. I would supervise the area, making sure people wouldn't do any fishing nor anything funny, if you know what I mean. I would wear this uniform, which consisted mainly of a t-shirt and shorts and sneakers. I got an excellent suntan while at it, being under the sun most of the day and looking at bays in bikini and those visiting yachts. I had famous Latin singer Luis Miguel show up with his yacht one time and one of his many girls on board. Little did I know that I would end up doing some of his best songs as covers as Majestic G later on. I remember a time that some dude was so drunk that when he stepped in his boat, he dropped a 6-pack of beer right there on the dock, which was about 10 feet deep. So as soon as he left, I grabbed a hold of my friend that would be snorkeling around the area all the time, and he got the 6-pack for me. I think that was pretty cool. Then there was a time when this beautiful blonde came in a wave runner in a nice bikini and bought some things and a pack of ice, and I assisted her with carrying the ice for her. Next day, I'm standing in front of a boat talking to the owners while they were filling up their tank, and through the corner of my eyes, I see her come up on her wave runner and walk straight up to me and throw her arms around me and kiss me on my lips, out of the blue. Needless to say, she left me breathless, and they couldn't believe it either. But believe it or not, after that wonderful experience, I had many girls surprise me with a kiss just like that time while working as a mascot wearing a chicken suit for this chicken restaurant called Caporal Chicken, standing on a corner intersection with a sign. Every time I would take off my mask to drink a Coke and take a break, this beautiful girl would stop and come out of her car and come up to me and kiss me, and I knew it had to be the chicken suit that did the trick. Somehow girls just love guys who are dressed like that, I think. They will beat their horn and the whole 9 yards just to get my attention, so that was very cool indeed. And so my friends, tomorrow I will continue with chapters 5 and 6. Until next time, this is Apostle Jeshurum saying goodbye, friends.
You have heard the messenger of the Lord with Apostle Jeshurum, preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. For more information on this podcast and this program, you may write us by email at Jeshurum, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. Again, that is Jeshurum, Jeshurum, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. This podcast was sponsored by the New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries, and by the free will offerings, tithes, and donations of those who are listeners of this podcast and are supporters of this great work of God. The preceding program has been a Plain and Simple Truth Ministries presentation.